Let me start by saying thanks for clicking on this video. I hope everybody out there is doing well. And if you're new here, welcome. Thanks to all my subscribers and everybody that comments and shares. I really appreciate it. This is one of those sets that's taken me a really long time to complete. As you can see, I got it way back in 2021. This all started with that Rogers snare in the middle. I went to buy the Rogers snare off of this old timer. He's an old picker. And while I was there buying the snare, he happened to say he had that white marine pearl Gretsch set that was across the street in his storage area. Turns out it was a 3-ply. I made an agreement to buy that. Then he tells me he has a silver sparkle round badge at his house. So I end up buying this silver sparkle round badge, which is just the 3 pieces. It was missing the tom, the snare, floor tom, and bass drum, just as you see it here. Now it took me almost 2 years to find a tom to match this set. Actually, I believe it was exactly 2 years. When I bought this, I never imagined it would take me 2 years to find a silver sparkle 12-inch round badge tom, being one of the more common finishes. But I'm pretty dedicated to bringing these old sets back to life. So that's how long it took. It takes whatever it takes. So that being said, when this one popped up, I jumped on it. I couldn't be too picky. Unfortunately, somebody had removed the paper tag and painted the inside white, so I'm going to have to deal with that. It was also missing the tone controls and the tension rods. Fortunately, they didn't drill any extra holes to mount that tone control that was in there, and I was able to locate the correct tone controls pretty easily. The original 3 pieces I got were actually in really good condition, but somebody did replace the inlays, or the inlays were missing, and they used this silver sparkly tape kind of stuff. Originally, I was thinking about leaving them, but I decided to just replace them, which you'll see. So I started this video and restoration about a year ago, and then for some reason I just lost interest. A lot of other stuff had started popping up and stuff that I was more interested in, but I finally got back to it. So this set is really 3 years in the making. Well, enough of me blabbing, let's get into it. So I started with the 12-inch tom. I decided to use this graffiti remover rather than going right to paint stripper, hopeful that I was going to be able to save the silver sealer underneath. But that didn't really work out. It ended up taking a good amount of the silver sealer off too. A lot of this stuff is trial and error. I have had good luck with this graffiti remover, taking paint off while not disturbing the paint underneath, but obviously this didn't work. Any other way I would have removed the white paint, I was going to have to redo the silver sealer anyways, so it was worth a shot. I just continued on and removed all the white paint I could. So whoever painted this also felt the need to paint the edges. So what I did there was just sprayed the edges down with some of that graffiti remover. This graffiti remover is safe for wrap. I've used it on several wraps and never had an issue. I followed that up with a plastic razor knife and just scraped what I could off of it. Then I followed that up with some pretty rough sandpaper. I wasn't applying any pressure. I was just trying to ball up the paint that was on there. That worked out pretty well, getting most of the paint off of there. Again, I wasn't applying any pressure. I wasn't reforming the edge or anything like that. Just getting the paint off. Then I followed that up with a little bit more of that graffiti remover and a rag, just to get any little bit of the paint left on there off of it. As you can see, that worked really well. It got all the paint off of the edges and most of it off the inside of the shell. Then I gave the inside a quick sanding. So that's it. I'm calling it good enough for repainting. All the paint's off the bearing edges and most of it's off the inside. Whatever is left will be covered by the new paint. Now on to fixing the seam on the shell. This one hadn't completely come apart. It was only about halfway. So I started with taping it off. This way, if any contact cement comes out of the seam when I'm clamping it, it goes onto the tape instead of the wrap. Then I lifted up the corner and applied some 3M NF30 contact cement. If you've seen any of my previous videos, this is always what I use for gluing down any large portions of wrap. So after I've worked the glue in there really well, I take a rag and wipe off all the excess. Then I follow that up with wedging something in between the wrap and the shell to let air in there for the glue to dry. After the glue's dry, I remove whatever I wedged in there. Then I use a block of wood and a clamp and clamp it overnight. Then on to painting the inside of the shell. I used Rust-Oleum aluminum, which was recommended to me by Bruce at Vintage Drum Restoration Garage. If you haven't seen his channel, check it out. He's a really nice guy, really knowledgeable, been restoring drums forever. So as you can see, I just used a foam brush and brushed it on. I didn't go too heavy. I just put a nice even coat around the whole thing. Then after the shell was completely covered, I went around it once again with the brush without adding any more paint. Then I let the paint dry for a little while, and I went back over it again with the brush just to try to knock down some of the sheen. Then I hit it with a paper towel, again to try to knock down the sheen, get that kind of dull finish that the Gretsch Silver Sailor had. So this is just what worked for me, I think. What I was happy with. I'm not some kind of artisan painter or anything like that, but I was happy with the result, and you'll see that later. So the seam on the floor tom is actually in pretty good shape. It's nice and tight all the way down here. It's just got a little bit of lift up on the ends. There's no way I could get contact cement in there. So what I got here is a 2-part epoxy. So it's really easy to use. You just do an equal part of each, the resin and the hardener. So for polishing the shells, I always start out with a cleaner to get all the debris and contaminants off the wrap before I start polishing. So for polishing the wrap, I use Novice 2 on my little Milwaukee polisher. I start out on the low setting and spread it all around, and then I turn the polisher onto the high setting and polish all the Novice 2 off of it. I've gotten great results with this. This little polisher is a lifesaver. I used to do this all by hand. I've seen people use a buffer, but this little polisher works great for me. So now on to fixing the seams on the bass drum. They weren't too bad, they were just a little wavy. This old wrap tends to have a little bit of spring memory to it. So when you go to glue it down, it just wants to peel right back open. This isn't my trick, I'm sure it's been around forever. But what I do is I take an iron and wax paper on low and just run it back and forth until the wrap gets pliable again and it's sitting nice and flat. That way when you go to glue it, you have two flat surfaces to mate together. So as you can see, the seam is much flatter now. And what I'm doing is I'm using that same 2-part epoxy glue I used earlier on the floor tom, and then I'll clamp it. So here it is, mostly back together. I think the Silver Sailor matches really well with the others. I decided late in the game to redo the inlays on the hoops, so I had to order some samples and I waited for the inlays for a couple weeks, but I finally got them and it's all back together now. So here it is complete. I didn't film refinishing the bass drum hoops as I already did a video on that, but the new paint, new inlays, all the wraps polished, all the chromes polished. It's just a nice little set. It'll never be a collector's piece as the tom is an original to it, but I'd say it's a really, really nice player's set. So I put Classic Fit Remo Ambassadors top and bottom on the toms and a Remo Ambassador on the snare. The bass drum, I just put the heads that I got with it back on it. But as you can see, the seams are nice and tight now, laying flat. I didn't have to do much with this floor tom but glue the ends. But you can see the bass drum, in my opinion, is a huge difference. They lay flat now, they're tight, they're not sticking out. They're not perfect by any means, but these are vintage drums, nothing's perfect. So anyways, if you like this type of content, please like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I really appreciate it. And if anybody's interested in this set, it will probably be up for sale soon. You can contact me through my social medias, and I'll bang on them a little bit so you guys can have an idea of what they sound like. And as always, take care.